What topic does this come under? You tell me. Think about it.
Decision support.
Thank you. Now, I'll admit, this could be under databases because we all know spreadsheets are what kind of database? A flat file database, okay? But the word that should have clued you in was this one, design. When you think about a database, a flat file database, and how it has to be designed, there's not that much to design. There's just columns and rows, and then there's data. In fact, if you wanted to design a database or flat file, you would probably just make a data dictionary. That's as much design as there is, okay? But if you're making a simple spreadsheet-based decision support system, it can be a little more interesting, okay? Second reason why you would think, okay, yeah, pen and paper, this is under decision support systems, is because you have to write these in your exams. You have to show people you understand how you can make a decision support system, just a simple one, but you don't get to bring computers in to your exams, at least not yet. So, pen and paper, okay? Now, what I'd encourage you to do is if you have a sheet of paper there, I'll encourage you to turn it landscape so that you can, because what will happen is you're going to have columns across the top, and they're generally wider than you'd want them to be, and you won't be able to fit them all across. Now, I'm going to do a super simple example with you, and demonstrate how, well, okay, look, we would know how to make this spreadsheet if we did it in Excel, okay? In fact, I'm going to do one that you have already made in Excel. But there's just like 2 or 3 little things you need to be aware of when you're putting it onto paper, when you're trying to put up your answer, that will be helpful too, okay? So, does anyone remember when I ran you through spreadsheet decision support systems, what was the first one that we designed? We did one together. It was very simple. It had to do with weight, right? Specifically, weight, height, body mass index, okay? And we did all the columns, we did some formulas and that kind of thing. So what I want to do is rehearse that decision support system, because you know it quite well, and do it on paper, okay? So I want you to think about in your head, okay, what does this decision support system have in it? What kind of data do we put in, okay? So the first thing that I would write for myself, okay, is, all right, what inputs do I need to provide, okay? So what inputs do we need to provide if we're making a decision support system in a spreadsheet and I want BMIs? What am I going to need? What was the first column? Name. Okay, so I'm going to need a person, right? Not much use to me if I can work out all these things, but I don't know who it's for, okay? And then the BMI itself is comprised of 2 different numbers. What are they? Height and weight. Good. Okay, now at this stage, what I'm doing is I'm trying to structure this in my head so that when I actually create the spreadsheet and put it out on my, my landscape piece of paper, I'll know where things are going to go, and rather than, you know, if you start an essay and you start the beginning and then you start making points and then you're like, I don't know where this is going. I don't know how it's going to end, okay? So we want to have a plan before we actually put it on paper. Now, what comes out? What's produced out of these inputs, okay? I'd probably suggest 2 things, I think, that we did on ours. What's the first thing? The most obvious one, we've already mentioned it. The actual BMI. And then we also did something else. We used some fancy if statements, and we were creative, and we said, out of the BMI, we made a, do you remember, does anyone remember? Either a recommendation, or even really simply, just like a classification. Like, what kind of person does your BMI tell us you are? Okay? Are you heavy? Are you normal? Are you light? What are you? Okay? So, this is going to be the user data that comes in, and we're going to have to make some formulas, some calculations to work these out. All right? So now that we've got that in our heads, yeah, that's probably enough. Let's actually start to build this spreadsheet. Okay? Now, one of the advantages of using Excel, to explain this to you at the beginning, is that everything's already set up. You've got your columns across the top, you've got rows, but since you're doing this on pen and paper, and you know, in a few months you'll get an exam booklet and it'll just be, you know, a blank sheet with just a few lines across it, okay? You've got to do everything from scratch, including these columns and rows, okay? So the first thing I want is, think about this data in and this data out, and what columns are we going to put in here, okay? So the first column, and columns, if you remember, they're all letters across the top. That's going to be the name, right? No props. I'm going to struggle, by the way, because this screen just doesn't quite have the resolution that I'll need, but hopefully your landscape piece of paper will do. Now, the next column over, that's probably going to be height, right? Now, I'm going to put that as centimeters because that tends to be the way that we say height, and we need to specify it in some format. But when you're actually working out the BMI, you can't use the height in centimeters, right? What do you have to do?
Convert to meters.
Thank you. So I'm going to make that the next column over. Okay, now this is not a user input, but it's going to be based off of one. Okay, we also said we needed weight. And that needs to be in kilograms. Okay, do go ahead and specify units, that's important. And then I've got 4 columns and I need 2 more corresponding to these outputs, right? So I'm going to have this 5th column as the actual BMI, right? And this last column as I can fit it on 2 lines. As the kind of person who we've got. So far, so good? Right, now, in a spreadsheet, this is all cells, right? This is a grid. And this A, B, C, D, E, F is actually not part of the spreadsheet. It's just describing what we've got here. And then underneath, should extend this off. This is sort of like our header row. These are all the fields, so that's my first row. And then after that comes the data, right? 2, 3, 4, and so on. Oops. I'm getting the idea, all right? Now there's the first half of the design, okay? That's what it sort of looks like when you put together the pen and paper spreadsheet. But we need to fill some stuff in here, right? So the first thing I want to distinguish between is that some of this is user inputted, right? And some of it is calculated by the spreadsheet, okay? So which parts are which? Name, height in centimeters, and weight. That's all user provided information, okay? So over these cells, I'm going to say user data. Okay, and if you have another color, you can use that, but black will do because that's what will scan up as anyway, right? So all of these cells are user data. Skip this one. This column here is also user data, right? Okay, so you can see which areas I've blocked off, right? Now what's left? These 1, 2, 3 columns, okay?